I'm taking half of everything. The condo, the shares, even the mum money. That's marriage law. James's voice carried across the courtroom like he was announcing championship scores, loud enough that the stenographer's fingers actually paused. The confidence in his tone made my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral, my hands resting lightly on the table. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. I trust you have done that. Now, let's begin. My name is Maria Delgado. I'm 42 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting in a Nashville divorce court watching my husband of 5 years announce his intention to rob me blind, using the legal system as his getaway car. James sat at the opposite table with his new attorney, looking like he'd already cashed the check. His tailored blazer, purchased ironically with profits from the logistics company I built, fit him perfectly. His posture radiated entitlement, that same easy charm that once made me laugh now triggering something colder, sharper. The slicked-back hair, the expensive watch, even the way he drummed his fingers on the armrest. It all screamed victory lap. Your Honor, James's attorney continued, shuffling through an impressive stack of documents. My client is entitled to his fair share of all marital property, including assets Mrs. Delgado acquired before the marriage and the substantial inheritance she received during it. The lawyer's briefcase was a theatre prop, bulging with paper meant to intimidate. I watched a few spectators in the gallery lean forward, their expressions a mix of fascination and voyeuristic calculation. Word had gotten out. James had made sure of that. A couple of local reporters sat near the back, notebooks open, clearly expecting a juicy settlement story. Tech founder forced to split fortune with charming husband. One of them was James's friend. I'd seen them grab coffee before the hearing started. Judge Harrison, a silver-haired man in his late 50s, with the kind of face that had seen 1,000 bad arguments, scanned the opening briefs with a completely neutral expression. 23 years on the family court bench, according to the plaque outside his chambers. I imagined he'd witnessed every flavor of greed, every version of creative accounting, every tearful plea and angry accusation. But something told me he hadn't seen this yet. James half-turned in his seat, flashing me what I'm sure he thought was a magnanimous smile, the kind that said, "Don't take it personally, it's just business." The audacity nearly made me laugh out loud. This was the same man who used to text me motivational quotes before pitch meetings, who said he wanted to build a life as a team, who held my hand at my mother's funeral and promised he'd never let me face anything alone. 5 years. 5 years of marriage, and every single one of them had been a transaction I hadn't realized I was making. The courtroom felt smaller than it had that morning. Dark wood paneling absorbing sound, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the faint smell of old paper and floor polish. Through the tall windows, I could hear Nashville moving on without us. Traffic humming, a distant siren, someone's laughter echoing off brick. Normal life, continuing. Mine was being dissected under courtroom lights by a man who thought love was just another term for access. I felt the weight of the slim blue folder resting on the table in front of me. Unassuming, professional, deadly. Mrs. Delgado, Judge Harrison said, his gaze shifting to me directly. Do you have a response to these claims? I stood slowly, feeling my pulse in my wrists but my breathing steady. This was the moment James's performance would meet reality. Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly, sliding the blue folder forward. I believe there's something the court needs to see. Looking back now, I should have recognized the pattern much earlier, but grief has a way of lowering your defenses. I met James 3 years after my mother died, at a tech and creator summit in Austin, where I'd been invited to speak on last-mile delivery optimization. I was 37, running a 2-van pilot program that I'd bootstrapped from savings, working 16-hour days, and nursing a loneliness I didn't want to admit to anyone. If I'm being honest, I should have known better from the start. But grief makes you stupid. And I met James right when stupid felt like optimism. 3 years after my mum died, I was running a logistics startup on fumes and frozen meals, and he showed up at a conference in Austin looking like the answer to questions I hadn't asked yet. He was charming, attentive, very vocal about wanting to be a team. But I wasn't careless. Before we married, my attorney, bless her paranoid heart, insisted on a prenup. Clean terms. My premarital condo stayed titled solely to me. My company shares remained in my separate brokerage account. My salary hit my personal checking. We opened one joint account for household bills, a courtesy, not a merger. James signed everything, even waived his right to independent counsel in writing. I trust you, he'd said, pen hovering over the signature line. I don't need a lawyer to tell me we're partners. When my mother's estate settled a year into our marriage, her tiny bookstore and a modest index fund, I placed everything in a revocable trust titled only to me. Not a single dollar touched our joint account. James knew. He said he understood, but understanding and accepting are different things. It feels like you don't trust me, he'd say, usually after a few drinks. Real partners share everything. Why won't you add me to the condo title? It's symbolic. Symbolic. That word did a lot of heavy lifting. Meanwhile, James was building his brand. A leased luxury SUV he couldn't afford, bottle service he called networking, gear for business ventures that never quite launched. His credit cards, solely in his name, were bleeding red. When he started using phrases like community property and marital investment, I hired a forensic accountant. She color-coded 5 years of statements, green for clean, red for risk. Everything stayed green. Then I found the emails. Buried in an old thread, James had written, I know the prenup means your premarital stuff and inheritance are yours. I just need to feel part of it. I printed every one, date stamped, back in court. James leaned forward, his attorney's voice cutting through the room. Your Honor, Mrs. Delgado moved significant assets the night before filing. We believe she was hiding money. My attorney didn't miss a beat. Your Honor, I'd like to submit the bank's automated audit logs for review. The audit logs were clean. Automated monthly transfers, scheduled 6 months before I'd even filed. But that wasn't the part that made the reporters' pens fly across their notebooks. That honor belonged to the video. Your Honor, my attorney said calmly, I'd like to submit Exhibit C, the post-nuptial addendum. Executed 2 years into the marriage. James's face went pale. He'd forgotten about the post-nup, the one he'd requested. The clerk cued the video on the courtroom monitor. There was James, on camera, sitting across from a notary in a bright, well-lit office. The notary's voice was steady, professional. Mr. Hollis, do you understand that this addendum reaffirms that your wife's premarital property and any inheritance she receives are excluded from marital assets and alimony calculations? James on screen relaxed, confident. Yes. And you've had adequate time to review these terms and consult with an attorney if you wish. Yes, I'm good. Then, with a little laugh that now sounded like nails on a chalkboard, guess I'll just have to make my own millions. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of reporters scribbling furiously. Judge Harrison's eyebrow lifted just slightly. Interesting. James's attorney pivoted fast. Your Honor, my client was under duress. My attorney slid forward the notary's checklist. Breaks offered, cooling off period documented. Seek independent counsel. Repeated 3 times. No duress, just signatures. Then came the debt boomerang. Your Honor, my attorney continued, Mr. Hollis also claims his personal expenditures were marital investments. I'd like to submit his financial summary. $68,400 in personal credit card debt. Line items include luxury SUV lease payments, nightclub charges, memberships to private lounges, and an LLC that never filed a tax return. Judge Harrison scanned the document. Bottle service is now a business expense? James's attorney tried once more, producing a printout with a flourish. Your Honor, These late-night transfers prove Mrs. Delgado moved assets to hide them. The bank's compliance officer, present via phone, delivered the kill shot. Those are automated dividend rebalances, scheduled 6 months prior to the filing date. Judge Harrison looked at James. Anything else, Mr. Hollis, before I take judicial notice of your signatures? James said nothing. Judge Harrison removed his reading glasses and set them on the bench with deliberate care. Then he spoke. Let the record reflect that the court has reviewed the prenuptial agreement dated March 2019, properly executed and notarized, as well as the postnuptial addendum dated April 2021, witnessed and recorded with full comprehension checks documented. He paused, flipping through the blue folder's contents. Both agreements are clear, unambiguous, and legally binding. I felt my shoulders drop half an inch. Breathe. The court finds that Mrs. Delgado's premarital condominium, her company shares held in a separate brokerage account, and the inheritance received from her mother's estate are separate property, excluded from equitable division. His voice was steady, factual. The trust corpus remains solely titled to Mrs. Delgado and is not subject to any claim by Mr. Hollis. James shifted in his seat. His attorney's jaw tightened. The joint checking account will be squared for routine household expenses incurred during the marriage. Standard arithmetic applies. Mr. Hollis is entitled to no alimony, as no exception was negotiated in either the prenuptial or postnuptial agreements. Judge Harrison's gaze shifted to James. Furthermore, the court assigns all personal debts incurred by Mr. Hollis, totaling $68,400, to Mr. Hollis alone. These expenditures do not constitute marital investment. Then came the part that made my attorney smile. Additionally, pursuant to Section 12 of the prenuptial agreement, the bad faith clause has been triggered. Mr. Hollis is ordered to pay a portion of Mrs. Delgado's legal fees. James stood abruptly. Your Honor, this isn't fair. Judge Harrison's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. Mr. Hollis, fairness starts with the contracts you read and signed. A quiet ripple of amusement passed through the gallery. Marriage doesn't nullify paperwork. The gavel came down. I stood slowly, feeling relief flood my chest. Not triumph, just gratitude. Gratitude to my past self for every boring document, every separate account, every receipt kept. Outside, reporters swarmed the hallway. I walked past microphones and shouted questions. The blue folder pressed against my ribs like a shield I no longer needed. James's victory lap never materialized. Within a week, his brand partners stopped returning calls. The luxury SUV dealer wanted the keys back. A podcast that had promised him a spotlight episode quietly uninvited him. His Instagram went dark. I didn't watch. I had work to do. 2 months after the ruling, I drafted a funding memo for something I'd been thinking about since the gavel came down. The Women's First Legal Fund. Prenup reviews, forensic accounting workshops, sliding scale legal counsel for founders, nurses, small business owners, anyone who couldn't afford to be optimistic about money. My mother's bookstore, the one she'd run for 30 years before passing it to me, became the first host site. Every other Saturday morning, we opened the back room for Financial Literacy Saturdays. How to title accounts. Avoid commingling traps, recognize extraction disguised as partnership, and, most importantly, how to say no without apologizing. On the third Saturday, a younger woman walked in, clutching a manila envelope. Her shoulders tight, her eyes darting like she wasn't sure she belonged. I recognized that posture. I'd worn it myself once. Coffee? I asked, gesturing to the folding table. She nodded, sitting down carefully. I'm getting married in 6 months. My fiancé says a prenup means I don't trust him. I slid a checklist across the table. Trust and preparation aren't opposites. Let's start with what you own and what you want to protect. She exhaled. Relief, recognition, permission. Later that evening, I filed the blue folder on a shelf in my home office, spine out, next to my company's incorporation docs and my mother's estate paperwork. Not a weapon anymore, a manual, a reminder. Judge Harrison's quiet laugh hadn't been cruel. It had been clarity, the sound of someone recognizing the truth when paperwork speaks louder than promises. I poured myself tea, opened my laptop, and started drafting the next workshop outline. Preparation, I'd learned, it isn't about expecting the worst. It's about being ready for anything.